Thanks everyone for joining us. So our topic for today that hopefully you're aware of. If not, then you're going to learn something you hadn't expected. But we're going to talk about Dynamics 365 Business Central, particularly for the nonprofits. And we're also going to give you a little dose of AI as well, because I don't think we're allowed to do a presentation these days without it. It's some pretty interesting, exciting stuff. So it's going to be a quick overview of who you'll be hearing from today, and I'll let the team introduce themselves. So Pete, why don't you go first?
Yeah, hi everyone. I'm Pete, based in the UK. I've been with Foremost Pro for a couple of years now, but before that, I was working in the dynamic space for many, many years since the late 90s. Done lots of projects for not-for-profit organizations over the years, so hopefully I'm in a good position to advise you guys on potential solutions.
You are indeed, Pete. Yeah, I've heard you. Yeah, you know what you're talking about. So appreciate that. Phil, I mean, you can give a little of your background here.
Yeah, hi everyone. I'm Phil Kameen. I'm a technical architect at Foremost Pro. I've been with Foremost Pro almost 3 years now, and I've been in Dynamics since version 4 back in 2009. And I've got a background in a certain amount of doing AI along the way. Back in 1995, I did an MSc, so it's always been part of the background. And with the movement from the Power Platform recently across a lot of AI being involved there, it's something we've been able to roll into a lot more of what we do in Dynamics. So looking forward to telling you a bit about that and Copilot.
Yeah, Phil's got all the fun stuff here. So, I'm Todd Johnson. So I'm the head of our Dynamics business here in the U.S. I've done this forever, so I won't bore you with how long I've been doing this, but I've been in the Microsoft space like my whole career, and happy to be there. Happy chatting with you all today. So, with that, like I said, I'm gonna go quickly through the Microsoft story here. The Microsoft group that we're very tied to. It's called their Microsoft Technology for Social Impact. A couple things that I do want to share. They take an interesting model where they're offering very attractive pricing on all their products. Far more than it's far more economical than what their standard commercial customers pay. And they're taking the approach that any of the money they make on that, they turn around and go back and reinvest in this space. It was a really cool model. It's really a sort of nice virtuous cycle there. Really happy to be working with them as part of that. I'll just share some of these numbers because their scale is pretty impressive. In terms of how much impact they're having on nonprofits, and then in turn what kind of impact that has on the world at large, right? So very important. Love that Microsoft has really ramped this up over the past couple of years. And that fits very well with our go-to-market and how we the kind of clients that we like to help as well. So it's a very nice match there. So I won't spend a ton of time on this. Microsoft licensing, there's always complexity in that. The quick takeaway on this slide is there's some really, really attractive pricing for nonprofits. You have to go through and do some things to make sure that you qualify and all that sort of good things. All kinds of things that we can help you with Microsoft, but makes these things very accessible. Any of the nonprofit organizations, this should be on your radar. So a bit more about us, if you will, because I'm going to assume that that not everybody's heard of us, because particularly since we're new here in the U.S. So Foremost Pro, the company's been around just over 12 years. Based in the UK, as you might have heard some of the accents of my colleagues here. And very proud of the work we do. All we do is Microsoft. So very focused on what Microsoft calls their business application stack. That's all that we do. Our team has tremendous depth of expertise around that. One thing I always like to point out is we have what we call a hybrid consultant. And so what does that mean? So we have consultants that are not only deep in the technology, but they also can talk to you and also understand your business needs and your process needs to make sure that the solution we're putting together fits what you need it to do, right? Sometimes, we have, you'll find some organizations that have that skill set is kind of, sitting in different teams. We find it works better. And, the consultants that we hire and we train and develop, their careers here, are very well versed in this is one of the reasons we're very successful in what we do. So, and then we certainly have all the support and things that you need long term as well. Enough about us. So yeah, I sort of alluded to this in the agenda. So yeah, we'll give you an overview of Business Central. I will do one thing here in that you may be thinking Business Central. Well, I'm not nonprofit. Is this a business? So a little bit on semantics, and we try to train ourselves here as well. So Business Central is, and I'll talk a bit more about it again, what it is, but it very much has a fit functionality that are key for the nonprofit clients that we work with, right? And so we'll try to give you some ideas of some scenarios where that happens, and and the kind of things we do with our clients. And then again, yeah, AI is part of it. AI is part of everything that we're doing these days. It's built into the product these days with Business Central, and there's some additional things that Microsoft brings to market. We're going to give you a little overview of that as well. So Business Central itself, Business Central, if you haven't heard it, it's what's called an ERP, Enterprise Resource Planning System, which is kind of a mouthful. What I would normally tell people is that, think of it as your system of record. Any organization, you have to keep track of your financials. You have to keep track, of everything that the operations that you do as that organization, right? So this is a system that does that. We see a lot of clients that start small and you're successful, and you might start doing things manually with Excel and so forth. That gets complicated and convoluted, and you outgrow that. This is a system, when you're sort of ready to step up, and particularly strong about the financials, for your accounting fans or part-time accounting fans, you'll see some of that today. It's one of these products that Microsoft has that everybody knows about, and it's actually a very, very popular and broadly used system. It's been around a long time. And because it comes from Microsoft, you'll see some things in its interface, as well as how it works with all the rest of their productivity tools that make it very easy. So there's some things that just work really well, very familiar out of the box. For me as a non-accountant, I'm an engineer by training, but it's a very approachable system and very configurable. That's where we come in, is we can help tweak it, making sure that it is actually tuned to your specifications and you get what you need out of it. So with that, Pete, I'm going to let you take it from here, because you in fact are the Business Central expert.
Yes, thanks, Todd. So here are some of the things that we'll be covering today. Some key accounting controls, fund accounting, expenditure accounting, some type controls around the purchase to pay cycle. We'll take a look at how Business Central can give you different reporting and budgeting options. And I'm going to show you how some tangible examples of how Business Central is integrated with other Office 365 products. We'll take a look at some things around project accounting. So project costing is a key requirement we're finding from our not-for-profit organizations of late, as is the multi-company and consolidation functionality suite inside the system. So quite a lot to cover, and I think I'd rather do a demonstration in the software than talk about PowerPoint so much. So let's get into some software. I'm going to start with what I would describe as the kind of financial backbone of the system, and that is the chart of accounts. All kind of finance systems have a chart of accounts. It's configurable how you want it to be configured. We've got an income section, an expenditure section, and a range of codes within each of those sections. We can, of course, drill into some detail here and see some transactions here. And the important point about the topic I'm describing now, this concept of fund accounting, is that the system is set up to tag each general ledger transaction by this fund code. And these are actually what we call dimensions. So you set up dimensions in the system. So if I go into a particular GL code and look at my dimensions, I can see that when I post to code 120, that's the donor type and fund are both mandatory. So that really puts a control in place to enforce the attachment of the fund and the donor type dimension against those transactions. So having done that, I can then look to do different filtering on my chart of accounts by those dimensions. So for example, if I go in here and I say, show me my figures in the chart of accounts filtered by restricted fund 1, then the figures on the right over here are responding to that filter. I can take that one further by viewing my GL balances by dimension. So in here, I'm saying I want to see my GL accounts as rows and my fund values as columns. So very quickly there, we've come to a report of our statement of financial activities by different dimensions, in this case, the fund dimension. And of course, we'll find throughout the system that we can always export this data to Excel should we need to. So let's talk a little bit about how we process various types of income. Of course, we've got journals. So I could do a one-off journal for a legacy donation, for example. I could have a recurring journal for corporates maybe that want to do repeat donations into the not-for-profit organization. I can do sales invoices if I want to. I can also do things like recurring invoices. So let's just go and have a little look at those. Here we've got recurring invoice templates. So the idea of this really is to set up a template where a corporate, let's say a corporate wanted to do a donation every month or quarter, but they actually needed an invoice that they could then pay, then we would use something like recurring invoices. So behind each template, we've got a schedule here. You can see down at the bottom, it's a donation for $500 every month. We have a schedule that says, you know, do an invoice on the first day of each month. And then what happens is we do a make invoices function, and that would give us the next invoice, and the template would just tick over, and they would just sit there and recur every month, every quarter, or whatever. So that's quite an easy way of administering the recurring revenue side of something like donations. We've also got functionality around direct debit collections. So if you wanted to collect money regularly against those invoices for those donations, then the system's got built-in functionality to manage those things as well. So moving along to the expenditure side now, I've got something up here called purchase quotes. This is quite an important concept for the not-for-profit organizations, because where you get a high number of users that want to enter purchase requisitions into the system, normally we would need to license those users with a full license for the system. But the good news is with purchase quotes or requisitions, you can create these using what's called a team member license, which is a very cost-effective license, and currently is about 10% of the price of a full license. So around about $3 a month per user, I think, is about right. So let's go and put a quote into the system. So this is just me saying that I want to buy something. Let's go down here and select our expenditure code. And let's say I wanted to buy some storage space. Okay, that's going to cost me $300. And I'm going to then request approval. And I can do that using the built-in workflows, or I can use Power Automate workflows. So here you can see how Microsoft are embedding Power Automate. It's an Office 365 application directly within the finance application. I'm going to go ahead and make an order from this quote. And I've got my purchase order, and of course I can do things like email my purchase order directly from the system. So I've got you know, email command here that will fire up an email, and I can send that off to the supplier, and that email is stored within the system. So you get full audit trail of the purchase order transaction inside Business Central. So where that becomes important now, linking back to the financials, if I go to my chart of accounts and move down here to my expenditure code, we have this column here, commitments. So actually these 5 columns here, they're all non-standard columns. They don't exist in the standard software. We've added these in response to a common requirement from our not-for-profit clients. They want to see the value of purchase commitments in the chart of accounts, which are then added to the actuals to give a forecast, and that forecast can then be compared to budget. So these are all custom, minor customizations we've made. You know, a couple of hours work it took. And from there, I can drill into commitments, and here are my purchase orders. And from there, of course, I can drill down into the kind of source purchase order. So what happens when the invoice comes in? So let's go out here now. I'm going to switch my profile to an accounts payable function. But what would happen is your vendors would send their invoices into the system, and this tile here, the ready to register tile, would fill up, and that would give us a view of a purchase invoice, which would be read by the system. There's OCR technology in there, and the purchase invoice would get created automatically. If there was a purchase order number on the purchase invoice, then it would be matched to the invoice, essentially breaking the back of the task of processing your accounts payable invoices. So maybe I'll set up an example in a bit where I can show you that actually working.
Okay. And one quick thing there, Pete, sorry to interrupt, but as you might notice, a couple of things. This is a live system, right? You know, Pete's just flying through because he's extraordinarily, you know, deep with it. But the one thing you did there too that maybe people didn't catch is that you switched roles. And so one of the things in BC is that, you know, the system is customized depending on the different types of users that are actually utilizing the system. You know, so when you switch roles there, that actually changes the things he has access to, the default screens of things, and, you know, so it's very tuned to, you know, the job of, you know, each particular role in the system.
Yes, thanks, Todd. Just seeing if I can set up an example here. Just bear with me. I'm going to just do this, and I'm going to send my invoice to my accounts payable email address. So that's on the way. So any second now we'll see an item appear in the ready to import tile, and we'll process that thereon. So whilst we wait for that, continuing on the OCR theme, if I just go to my where am I here? Thomas Pro, yeah. This is an expense portal. So this is actually a third-party solution provided by a company called Continia. It's common in the Business Central world for there to be third-party add-on solutions. So Microsoft take care of most of the functionality. Where there is a gap or a niche requirement, there are lots of add-ons that we can bolt into Business Central, and this is an example of one of them. So let me go and create a new expense. This is the portal. There's also a mobile phone app to do the process as well. And I'm just going to drag in a receipt. So here's my dinner receipt. Okay, so you can see it's read via OCR, the invoice or the receipt. It's populated the amount and the date, and I can go through and I can fill in the rest of the fields that I've determined are mandatory against this particular expense. So here we have the fund, here we have the donor type. It's a, you know, we're saying which expense type it is, and that's about it. So let's put in here, and then I would submit that, and that's my job done as an expense user. And then that expense goes through to the back office, and we'll be able to see that, process it, and post it, and then reimburse the employee. Okay, so let me just refresh this. You can see this tile here now has a ready to import record. So that is basically reading an email that's been sent into my accounts payable inbox. I can go in and I can import that file. Take a second here, and now it's ready to register. So the system reads the invoice. I can see here, if I click on the invoice number, it knows to look in this area, the date, and it's doing all that straight out the box via OCR technology. Now, if I wanted to map the field to a different section of the PDF, I would simply draw on here with my mouse, and then once it's happy and I've trained the system for this particular vendor, then the next time an invoice comes in, it should be all okay to go. So in this case here, it's saying that I've stipulated that the fund is mandatory. So I need to go and say, well, what fund does this relate to? And actually on here, it's telling me that my purchase invoice already exists, and that's because I've been using this in previous demos. So if I make this invoice number unique, put a G on the end, I can then register that invoice. So I kind of not really touched that invoice too much, and I've brought it through to an actual purchase invoice that we can then go and request approval for, or we can post it into our vendor ledger. So some quite neat OCR functionality there around AP processing. Okay, let's switch back to my main profile, which is the accountant profile. Okay, so up here in my list of shortcuts, we can browse to a list of projects. So I only have one here. This is just to give you an idea of what a project is really. It's got a customer, it could be internal, it could be an actual customer. It's got things like project managers and responsible people, and all kinds of different fields coming down the page here. The important section is this middle bit here, where we can break out the project into different steps or phases or tasks. Here I've got income and expenditure, and you can see that I billed an amount and I've incurred, $25 worth of cost. And all the time that those transactions are being posted with the project tagged against them, the profitability view of the project is building up here. So it's quite a comprehensive project costing tool, including the ability to calculate work in progress. You need to do things like deferred revenue and deferred costs and so on. Okay, so moving on, let's talk a little bit now about the multi-company consolidation aspects of Business Central. I would say 90% of our not-for-profit organizations, our clients, need to have a multi-entity structure. So, for example, here, I've got 3 companies, or 3 organizations: Demo, Charity, and Console. So really what the Console entity is for is to take figures from the subsidiary entities and suck them up into the consolidated company or organization. So how does that work? Let's go into business units. So here we have a charity entity and a not-for-profit entity. And I can run consolidation and specify my dates and so on. So let's do that now quickly. So what's happening here is that the chart of accounts in the consolidation company is effectively receiving a financial transaction, a journal from each business unit. So here you see, $365,000 is attributable to the NFP business unit and 241 to charity. So, it gives you a consolidated view of all the business units underneath it. And of course, as you would expect, we've got things like a consolidated trial balance report. Let me go in here and we'll say for October and just preview this. So this gives you a kind of idea of the output style of Business Central reports. I've got an overall figure and a breakdown by business unit. And we'll come on to look at more reports in a couple of minutes. Okay, so let's talk now a little bit about how Business Central is integrated with Office. We saw an example earlier of how Power Automate is embedded inside Business Central. Let's have a look at a little bit around Excel. So this page, oh, I'm in the wrong company. Let me just go and switch out to a different entity. So here we have a page called Vendor Ledger Entries. This is all the activity on all my vendors, my invoices, my payments, my expenses, and so on. Okay, if I wanted to, for example, go and look at the due dates on those records, you can see them here. I can go and edit the data in Excel. So there's lots of different use cases for the edit in Excel feature. Most commonly, it's updating lists of master data. It's adding payment terms to long lists of vendors. You can also do things like publish journals from Excel into Business Central. And we're seeing this feature used quite a lot within our not-for-profit client base currently. Let's go and take a look at how that works. So here I've got some data. Over here, I've got my due date column. I can find it. There it is. If I wanted to change this one from the 17th to the 31st, then it's changed in the spreadsheet. I'll publish it back. And let's go and have a look in Business Central. Where was it? That one there. It just changed. You may have saw it. So that's a really neat and easy way of working with data in Excel, then publishing those changes back to Business Central real time. Okay, so those are a couple of little examples of integration between Office 365 and Business Central. Just one final example. You can see on this list of data here, and in fact on most lists of data, we can share that information to teams. So that's fine. That saves the task of writing an email, and you can just send a link directly to that person or that group of people. They click on it and it opens Business Central. That's all good. How can I take that one step further? So in my Business Central Teams channel here, I can actually add a Business Central widget. So this is going to now ask me which environment do you want to share data from, which entity or organization. So I'm going to select my NFP, and then it says which object. So let's choose vendor ledger entries, and I want to share the open transactions view. So let's go and add that in now. I've got some authentication on my other screens, which should come through momentarily. Here it is. So here are my open entries. And the beauty about this is that to access the data in this way, I do not need any kind of Business Central license. All I need is a Microsoft 365 license. I can interact with the data. I can show the document. So let's say there was a purchase invoice in here with an attachment on there. You can open that attachment directly within Teams without requiring a license at all. So some really kind of neat advancements there from Microsoft in terms of connecting the Office 365 components. Okay, let's talk a little bit now about reporting. So within the system, there are lots of different types of reports. I often answer a question about a reporting requirement with a why not just use a page? There are lots of pages in the system that actually give you a reporting style output. We're looking at one here. It's the chart of accounts. I can filter this. I can sort it. I can apply different filtering to give me a report. So we saw earlier on the GL balance by dimension. This matrix in itself could be a report. So there are lots of examples of list data or list pages being representative of a report. So as well as that, we've got a load of what I would call paper reports. So if we go into the finance menu here, we've got all these standard reports. I think I counted once a couple of years ago, and there were about 280 standard reports in the system. So if you go and look at something like trial balance against the previous year, let's put a quick date filter in here, and we'll preview that report. So a straightforward trial balance report, as you would expect. The neat thing about that is, let me just go back into that report. Let's go into the trial balance, any report, is we can send the report to a schedule. So what that means is when I go to my role center, you'll see examples here of reports landing in my report inbox. So not only can we send any report to Excel or Word, but we can also send them to a schedule, in which case it will land in the inbox. We've also got a load of options within the financial reporting. So, you know, specifically for not-for-profit organizations, you would want to see a statement of financial activities, maybe by fund or donor type. And these are more kind of classically laid out reports where you're seeing your chart of accounts on the left and, you know, your figures aggregated in some way, in this case by fund, going over onto the right there. And if we wanted to, we could go in here and, you know, edit the column definition and say, I don't want to see, you know, add a column number 6. That might be my budget. I'll create my budget entries here and select my 2024 budget. And very quickly, I've just gone in there. If I view the financial report, I've now got a column showing the budget on the end. So it's quite an easy to use tool within Business Central. We've also got cash flow reports. So in here, if I go in, you can see on the right-hand side here, these are the cash flow statistics the last time the cash flows ran. So if I go into my worksheet here and suggest lines, the system will ask me, well, which elements of cash flow source do you want to include? Disposal of fixed assets, sales orders, payables, VAT, tax, and so on. So I'll include everything, and then I'll register the lines, and I can then go back and look at this nice report here. Again, this is an example of a pay as a report, and this is telling me that, you know, at the end of October, my net cash position is going to be 964, which is my opening cash less all the cash flow sources. So you can see that in a nice kind of weekly, daily, monthly, quarterly view if you need to. So continuing the theme of reporting, let's go back up to the top here. We've got a number of Excel reports. So Microsoft are planning quite a lot of investment into Excel reports. There are more examples of these appearing with every major and minor release. So let's have a look at something like a trial balance versus previous year. So I can download this report. It will open up a Excel template. So it's just getting the most recent data now from the database. So here I've got a nice pivot table. I can, you know, go and add columns. I can use my slices to filter and so on. So the idea is I would save that away as a spreadsheet, and then next time I need it, I would come and refresh it without needing to go into Business Central. And as I say, Microsoft are doing more and more of these Excel reports as time goes by. So finally, on the reporting piece, I just wanted to mention the Power BI functionality within Business Central. So I can go in here and I can select any one of my Power BI reports, both that have been set up for Business Central and otherwise. So for example, if I looked at my finance insights and then expanded the report, in a second we'll get a nice visual of Business Central finance data. So, you know, I haven't got a great lot of data in this system, but you can see the types of output that are achievable with some out-of-the-box reports. And I think I'm right in saying that Microsoft, in the next minor release, which will be November, I read that they were releasing 76 more reports, Power BI reports, just available straight out of the box. Okay, so moving on, just something I want to mention briefly before we move on to the Copilot scenarios, just this concept of sustainability. So this is a recent addition into the Business Central system by Microsoft, but it's the ability to record the ESG type statistics that previously were, the focus of, let's say, a spreadsheet or an external system. So we've now got a chart of sustainability accounts where we can say, what are the CO2 emissions for my rail-based activities, for example. We've got a sustainability journal that is used to record those entries. And we've got some kind of standard reports, emissions by category, facility, and so on. So as I say, that's a fairly new development from Microsoft, but it shows that they're heading in the right direction in terms of their being able to tick the ESG box. Okay, so finally, I'm going to wrap up with some Copilot features inside Business Central. So Copilot really is your AI assistant within the system, and it's used to help automate certain processes. So for example, if I go into a list of data, it's a fairly, boring list of data, but I can use this Copilot analysis now to give me some AI-based analysis. So let's go in here and create a new analysis, and I'll say subtotal by fund and donor type. Okay, I'll ask the Copilot to generate that view for me, and it will give me what I've asked for in this case, my fund by donor type, all my detailed transactions. And because it's a pivot, I can go and add, additional fields into here. When I'm happy with this, I can keep it, and that will be there for me to use again. Now, we use this system internally, and our CEO really kind of loves this ability to ask the system to give him an analysis, and it spits out something that's fairly close to what he needs. So another example of Copilot residing it directly inside Business Central, if I just delete this thing here, is when I go into my bank account reconciliation, I'm clicking reconcile, and I'm thinking, how does Copilot know how to reconcile my bank account? So the first step would be to import some data. So this is your bank statement. So I've imported my bank statement, and I'm now going to ask Copilot to generate me a bank reconciliation. So it's saying that 11 of your 12 statement lines are reconciled, but here is one that doesn't. So let's have a look at this. It's saying that 2 transactions in the system add up to 47,000. Do you want to accept the proposal? So if I keep that, I've now got this line here that's reconciled to the 2 lines on the right-hand side. So it's using AI to match transactions from your bank statement into your system. And of course, my next step would be to post that bank reconciliation away. So lastly, before I wrap up, I just want to cover off an example of Copilot functionality that's actually in Outlook and not in Business Central per se. So here I have an email in my inbox, and I've got a Copilot for finance feature up here. So let's go and open that up. It's summarizing the email for me. It's suggesting a reply, which we'll come back to. But importantly, it's found the email address against a customer inside Business Central. So here I can see my live aging data. I can also see my outstanding invoices that I can download, or I can update them to say, what's the promise date, promise to pay date, and what's the status. So any changes I make in here are written back to Business Central. And then, of course, what I can do is I can reply to that and say, thanks we note your payment date. And it will then generate an email reply with the text that you've suggested. And obviously you can embellish that if you want to, add attachments. But again, it's an assistant. It's helping you reduce the manual workload with some of your key accounting processes. So I think that's a really neat addition to Outlook, and it just shows you the investment and the time that Microsoft are putting into these Copilot features. Okay, so that's those are the things I wanted to touch on to show you how Business Central can help non-profits and charities in their daily financial processing.
Yeah, and yeah, thanks, Pete, and for everybody, that's the tip of the iceberg, and we covered a lot of territory there. One thing you may have mentioned, but if you didn't, if you did, it's worth revisiting here. Yeah, so we're demoing today is the cloud version, so it's a SaaS product, which there's some really nice things about that. One of the things that that gets you is that this will run on any device anywhere. So Pete was demoing it from a Windows machine. You can do it on your MacBook, you can do it on your favorite mobile device, et cetera, et cetera. It just all works. And then also by the fact that it's a cloud product, there's regular releases to it. So this is really the nice thing there, where Microsoft is making these investments, and you'll see the product continue to evolve and improve over time, and you just get that, right? That's what you get as part of being that platform. Phil, we saw some some of the flashes of Copilot, but you'll give us a little bit more of the background here and some other tricks that it'll do for us.
Yeah, hopefully this will sort of if you're wondering, you're hearing Copilot this and Copilot that, and maybe you've seen Copilot for sales and over in CRM or something like that, then you're like wondering what's going on with that. So we're doing a bit of a 101. The LLM is a large language model, and that's basically a big neural network. And a neural network is a type of computer software where what we're doing is we're training the neural network on a number of patterns. And sort of when I started out back in AI back in '95, we were using 586s, Pentiums, and like 8 megabytes of RAM, and it was taking days to train these tiny little models. These days, of course, cloud computing allows us to have huge models, with thousands of inputs and thousands of terabytes of data, and they take a lot of power, and they eventually get trained. And this large language model can then be attacked, and when you ask it a question, or what you're doing is your question is being transferred into a bunch of numbers effectively, and when that gets passed through the network says, okay, from all the data I've looked at, I think the next word that you want is going to be something else. So the example on the screen, I like to walk it's going to be dog, I would have thought 98% of the time, but parts of the internet are pretty weird, and so it might well be I like to walk my lizard as 2%. And so your LLM is going to spit out, I like to walk my dog. And you can change the context of what you put in there. So it might be that if you're saying, I really do like to have a drink, and so and I like to walk my dog to and it would potentially come up with beach. But now you've thrown in some additional context. The data that it's looking at is going to return something slightly different. So it might say, I like to go to the zoo, or I might want to go to the pub. And it depends upon this context that you're throwing into the prompt effectively. And the prompt is basically the question that you ask of your LLM. And if you're wondering, sort of where have I seen these LLMs? ChatGPT, there's a number of other ones out there. There's Claude, there's some Google have Llama, I believe it's called. And these, great name. And these tools are all work in very much the same kind of way. So we're talking about a little bit about context. If you're going to ask an LLM a question, it's been trained on a set of data from a specific point in time. And so it might be, certainly ChatGPT 3.5 was very famously trained up until 2020. And so it doesn't know anything about questions from 2022, for example. And so what you can do in addition is you can throw in something called retrieval augmentation, and that's additional bits of data. And Copilot does kind of this stuff for you, or you can do it yourself. We're running an AI Academy at Formus Pro in a week's time, and we're going to start talking about a bit about how you can do some of this retrieval augmentation. But sticking with the Copilot theme, Todd, if we want to jump to the next slide. What is Copilot? Lots of arrows on the screen, not expecting you to take in any of this stuff particularly, more than understanding that the LLM is over there on the right-hand side of the screen. And there's lots of other stuff that's happening before your prompt, before your question gets to the LLM. So it's coming into Copilot, and Copilot is doing some neat stuff called grounding. And that grounding is a lot of arrows pointing down towards the bottom of this picture here, talking to things like Bing. So it might be, you're asking a question about Taylor Swift or something. It'll reach out towards Bing and try and get some of those answers and bring that back as context. And if you're working within Copilot for 365, then it's got access to everything that you have in the Microsoft Graph. And the Microsoft Graph is a fancy way of saying all of your SharePoint sites, all of your emails, a whole bunch of other previous prompts that you might have had, because those are all being held within your graph. And that's to say, from a security perspective, none of this stuff is being recorded along any of these points. So if you talk to ChatGPT, any of your questions are going to be used to train that model. When it comes to Copilot, none of your data is going to be used to train any models along the route. So there's no chance of your data escaping on any of these rows here. And that's a really key thing that's, separates out Copilot from just, for example, ChatGPT. And just underneath where it says large language model, there's also something called RAI, and that stands for responsible AI. And that's a key part of what Microsoft are doing when they're putting together Copilot. It means that all of this technology is being used, to deal with, there's compliance going on in here, there's levels of governance, and all of the responses that the LLM returns are going back through and being monitored and checked. And in order to prevent your Copilot, your AI, giving you hopefully too much of a nonsense reply. It isn't to say that that's a guarantee, but it certainly means that it's much less likely to produce dodgy output. Like, for example, Canadian Airlines had the issue a few months ago where their Copilot, there wasn't a Copilot, their chatbot was able to start hallucinating. And that throws back to that thing we were talking about in the previous slide, where the information that it's working at, if it doesn't have an answer, it's got the whole of these 20 terabytes of information that it's been trained on, and it just starts cycling through it. And it comes up with some very, very reasonable looking answers, because that's how words fit together. So I think let's dive into a demo now, and we'll show you some of this Copilot in action, and a little bit of these are a couple of demos hopefully which line up where we can view this kind of information. So let's here I've got Microsoft Word and Copilot. Click on here. Am I expecting it to wake up? Yeah, describe. So throw something in. So here's a grant proposal for a charity. So probably the kind of thing that you do and you think, oh no, I've got to do this. I've got my templates maybe I could use. We could do all that with Copilot. But here's a nice quick example. It goes away and it starts to put together some very, interesting and solid looking questions and answers in order as part of your proposal. And so you reach out and you can look through this and you can think, okay, it's not got everything I need, for example. It's got a breakdown of costs. No, it's added that in. Although I didn't ask it to add that in. Can we change the budget to 1,000 USD? Let's put that through. And so it's going to regenerate. So this is something when you're building up prompts, it's you can refine and you can refine and you can refine, and it's a great way of building up what you need. And then once you reach a happy place in terms of the kind of prompt that you've put together, you can keep those prompts and you can store those prompts, and they become a useful tool. And for the next time you have to do this job, then your prompt is a much more refined, and can start producing what you need. So here we go, and that's gone through, and it's changed. It's picked up my budget, and it's made up some new numbers. And if we wanted to change any of these figures, I can just hunt that through here. I can change the tone and everything else I need to do. And at the end of the day, like all things AI, you need to check it and make sure that you're happy with what it's going to put out. Let's do something which is probably a lot more useful. I don't know how many of you are Teams users necessarily, but here is Microsoft Teams. And this was a meeting that we recorded, and what it's done is it's given me a little a recap area, and the AI has recorded it. We've used transcription. It's given us all the information we need, and now I can start asking questions of that. So I can go, what were my action items? I think there's a number of AIs recording what we're doing at the moment. I see, Ladybugs and somebody else as you're there recording this. Very similar tooling here. We've got the transcription, and once you've got that transcription, then you can drive out things like action items and stuff, and that's great. So we get a little bonus in Teams. If we'd have videoed this, our recap would show us things such as the videos. It would have broken it into chapters for us, given us a breakdown of who was saying what at what time, and lots of other information. But let's get this information here. So it has generated some AI notes. I could have asked it for this stuff, but what I'm going to do instead is I'm going to take this information. You've put all this effort in to this meeting, and I'm cutting and pasting that. Let's make sure it's definitely got that. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to throw that into PowerPoint. So it's going to work on a response there. So what you can do is all that information that you've gleaned in your meeting that you've recorded, and I do this sometimes at work if we've got to do documentation. I'll have a conversation with a developer and say, what have we done? What have we built? We'll discuss things, and then I draw that information out, and I can turn it into a piece of documentation. So it turns it from a conversation into a set of, this is the product we were talking about, and this is how we've done it. And great, it's finished. It's done its stuff. Crucial steps to keep your audience engaged. I think, did we cut and paste? Yeah, we did. Yeah, that's great. It's not just just made a bunch of natty slides. It's got it's put together. There's a title slide. There is not a conclusion slide. I think I'll ask this version to do it again. There we go. We've got a conversation in there about a US version of a presentation. It's come up with the images. It's given us an agenda, all this kind of stuff. So Copilot, I think, like Pete and like Todd have mentioned, you look at it as as your really helpful gopher. It does sort of 80% of what you need. And Todd, before I've called this doing the donkey work, and you said, Phil, no one's going to understand what donkey work is.
I know now.
Yeah, but now. But for everybody on the call, so all the tough stuff that you have to do when you're putting a presentation together, it's time consuming. You can chop that in half. You can take a lot of the information that you've got, and an awful lot of the time you are having to take information and regurgitate it in different ways. And this is a great tool for doing that. And so we're going to come up with a couple more examples as well. So hopefully you can see that there's a certain amount of value in that one. So let's start asking it to. I'm going to ask it to write a LinkedIn post about what my charity does, and I'm going to ask it to reference a file. So I'm just going to reference. Let's reference the file here. It's going to come on the screen. So I asked this is a budget for the charity program Nerds Need Help, and it's got a breakdown of costs and all that kind of stuff. So if I wanted to put this out in a LinkedIn post or do something like that, it's quite a lot of work to do that. I'd have to break it down and which bits do I need. I can ask Copilot to do that for me. So what I'm going to do is we're going to jump into the Copilot tool here in Microsoft Edge. We've got two tabs effectively at the top of it. One is called Work, and this is the bit that allows me on that diagram. Remember, we talked about the MS graph. This is the bit that has access to the full MS graph. And over on the other side, this is more generic web-based stuff. And so we can ask questions and we can ask this to, to generate images and all that kind of good stuff. So let's ask this. This is a work-based one. So I'm going to say to it, I want you to write me a LinkedIn post about what it does. And then I'm going to say, reference the file. Or I don't even need to say that. I can just say reference, and I can do bang. And this now gives me access to all of the files and meetings. So if I've recorded a meeting or if we've done transcription, then I can pick out that meeting in here and I can reference that. And the AI is going to pull out that information. It's going to have dived off into the Microsoft graph, pulled it back, put it through the LLM, and that's going to return and give you some information. So let's do this. So if we do budget for charity program, that one I've got, and then it's going to start producing those, some kind of LinkedIn post. And it does a fantastic job, and it's thrown in, because it knows it's a LinkedIn post, it's thrown in all this additional context that it has. And the key thing there is, things like, the hashtags and all that kind of thing have all been thrown in there as well. So it gives you a great deal of power in terms of how you can do stuff. You can also do something, you can do other summarization. So there is I've had some trouble today with a demo, unfortunately, but I've got a version of it here where this is a Azure for Architects PDF. I'm scrolling and you can see it's long and it's got lots of technical stuff and it's, could be a little bit tedious. But what I can do is I can ask for this file to be summarized. So if we find this file, and it's called Azure for Architects, and there it is. I can take 700 pages and I can boil it down into something a lot easier to deal with. And you can imagine this is hugely great. If you've got to look at any sort of documentation or what have you, then this is a great way of dealing with it. So we've done PowerPoint, we've looked at Word. This stuff's also available in Outlook. We've seen bits and pieces of that in the other demo. So let's just drive into Excel. And here's a spreadsheet. And whilst this is not sort of charity-based data, what you will see is that it's thousands of rows, hundreds, and about 3,000 or 4,000 rows. I can keep scrolling, but it's a lot of data. And if I want to get a handle on this, then I need to suddenly become an Excel guru, and I'm not an Excel guru. So instead, I've got an example of the kind of strength of that the AI can do for you. So I'm going to ask it a question, and it's about, let's just cut and paste that in, and we'll look at the query I've got here. So I'm asking about the average percentage of calls abandoned. So the spelling there is great, and I've misspelled September as well. And if we look at the data here, nowhere here does it say abandoned. It says abandoned because they've spelt properly. And if we look at the data, we've got months listed here as Sep and org, not September and things. So if I hit go, are you wondering whether or not the Copilot is going to get this wrong because I can't spell September or abandon properly? It's not. It's able to work through that. And that's, again, the additional power that an LLM has, and the additional work that Microsoft have done in Copilot, that is able to take that and it's able to make sense of that and give you an answer. So which I think is hugely powerful. And then one of my favorites, this is a more recent release, is over in OneDrive. So here's a set of CVs. So you might have been sent CVs before and you're wondering how to do comparisons of the type of them. Here's some CVs I made up before, and then there's a CV I definitely made up. It's my CV. And we're going to ask Copilot to compare the files. So it's going to go away. Let's get that bit off there. And it's going to give me some detail about all of these. And so ordinarily what it does is it gives me a table. And there you go. So it's giving me a table with a breakdown of what all of these CVs have and what their language skills and the like. And I was saying earlier to my wife, I did this demo and I said, I'm sure I had conversational French on my CV. And she laughed at me and said, your French is complete rubbish. It's certainly not even conversational. And she's right. I haven't put it on my CV, which is a good thing, frankly. But we can see it's broken down and it's given us all the details about what we need to know about these things. And then I can also ask questions about this. Which file has the most power platform experience? If I add that, yeah, let's do that again, please. I use please occasionally as well. If you come along to the AI Academy, I'll explain why I use please as a great way of breaking up the conversation and making sure we get information from the right part of the internet as well. But so let's which of the files has most power? Interesting to see if the spelling mistake gets that power platform experience. So it's going to go away and hopefully it's going to say that my CV has the most experience. Because yay, there we go. So now if someone's using this, they'll give me a great job because they know I got all this experience. But that's it in a nutshell. Hopefully you'll see there's a lot of Copilot exists in a lot of different ways, and so the key to I think engaging with it is trying to find whatever fits the role that you're working with. Be that working out of Business Central or Dynamics or even just within the Office suite itself.
Excellent, thanks, Phil. And yeah, that may be the most Inception-like demo I think I've ever seen. We had an AI recap of a meeting about a presentation, and then it created a presentation based on that. So, but it's extremely powerful stuff, and also nice job. It'd be embarrassing if it picked someone else's CV, but yours looks great. So, and with that, I think we're wrapped up. Hopefully you learned something, or at least got intrigued about something. We did cover a lot of ground. We're happy to go and dive in one-on-one, answer your questions, and if there's a particular aspect of what the solution does, hey, we'd love to show you.
Thanks very much, all.
Thanks. Goodbye.